Hi there, and thanks for joining us for another episode of RSBandB Update Supplemental. RSBandB Update Supplemental is the offshoot podcast of RSBandB Update, where we provide a bit more information on something RuneScape related, whether it be something that needs a bit of a technical preview or something that just could be talked about for a few more minutes. The topic of this week's supplemental deals with, of course, the 2014 combat beta, since that's in full swing, and portions of that beta are actually coming to game next week. So that makes this week's topic perfectly set for Revolution and Momentum Plus, since those haven't been talked about quite much yet, and they both do have great potential for the game going forward. So with that being said, let me just remind you to listen to our full shows on Saturday. You can find them at update.rsbnb.com. All right, so when the combat beta was first announced, there were two standouts that were shown to the public, them being Revolution and Momentum Plus, as well as ability queuing, but that is not as game-changing as these two have the potential to be. So I'm just going to chat a bit about where each of these fill in and provide a very, very simple solution to a problem that we've been having in game recently. All right. So Momentum came around with the 2012 EOC update. It was basically designed to give players an option to engage in combat without using abilities, which is good when you think about it, because that is what a good majority of people wanted when the EOC system first came out. But there's one problem with Momentum. The damage output of Momentum falls short of being useful to kill anything in a good amount of time. Momentum is being reworked to something called Momentum Plus, and it's going to allow for the use of ultimates and special attacks. This is good, but there's one better thing that has really overshadowed Momentum Plus in the view of this RSBandB Update supplemental, and that is Revolution. Revolution is an ability that was initially player suggested, and it is in the 2014 beta. And basically, all Revolution does is sets up a queue of up to 9 basic abilities that will be automatically fired off by the RuneScape game itself. So basically, you line up an action bar of 9 abilities, and they will fire off in sequence whenever they are ready. It's a great way to build up adrenaline and attack NPCs without having to press as many buttons. Now, combined with the presets that the beta is going to offer, and when it comes into game next week, this will create a very relaxing combat experience by lowering actions per minute. And this is essentially what Momentum was designed to do from the very beginning. So keep that in mind for just a couple minutes. Revolution can also be combined with thresholds, ultimates, and specials. This one-ups Momentum in that Momentum can only use ultimates and special attacks, whereas with Revolution, the player has the ability to also use thresholds, which are great for dealing large amounts of damage very quickly. The beta, and when it arrives in-game next week, are going to offer combat presets for whichever combat type you're using, and whatever type of weapon you're using. So if you've never used the Evolution of Combat system before, and you want to give it a try with Revolution, all you need to do is toggle Revolution, and you'll be given a chance to take in a preset, and there you go. You can go off to combat and run dual wielding or run whatever setup your heart desires. When it comes down to it, Revolution plus these presets offers a faster way of killing things with less button strokes than Momentum offered. This is where the idea comes into play that Revolution has superseded Momentum, in that players will just want to use Revolution and not necessarily need to use Momentum at all, because Momentum still has low damage output and can only use ultimates and specials, whereas Revolution uses abilities that are provided by presets, it uses thresholds, it uses ultimates, and it can use special attacks as well. So it's clear, I think, that Revolution is the best solution that has been offered in this beta. Now, log into the beta before this comes out next week. Give it a try. Let me know how it works. Does it replace Momentum? What are you finding yourself using more, Revolution with presets or Momentum? And if not, what's missing? What would make you use Revolution over Momentum? Given that Revolution has somewhat superseded Momentum, we need to find something that Momentum can be used for. So the presentation of Momentum could be tweaked to fix the very large elephant in the room, and that is the role of legacy combat and what it should play in RuneScape, if any. The community is extremely divided over this, and providing a simple solution would go a long way to alleviating some of these concerns. Earlier this week, I was chatting with one of our Informer writers at informer.rsbnb.com, specifically Jason, pertaining to a draft article of his in which he talked about the combat beta and the legacy combat system that's being talked about. We basically talked about what we've talked about here, and that Revolution has somewhat superseded Momentum in that Revolution deals more damage. So we both came up with the idea that Momentum can be used for something else, and the solution's very simple. The solution is to make Momentum the legacy combat system that people desire. You can read the article at informer.rsbnb.com or find the link in the description of this video. Now, the old version of Momentum simply becomes legacy combat. The player will toggle legacy mode using the slider that's going to be existing in the game next week, and when this happens, the player will be asked if they want to change their interfaces to look like what the old combat system looked like, which, when you think about it, that is what most people wanted. It would look pretty much like the old interface. And yes, there would be a special attack option, and there would be ways to change your combat style just by pressing a button in the top interface. You wouldn't need to navigate to something that's hidden in the powers menu. Overall, I think this is the simplest solution to legacy combat. It's easy to implement and doesn't add too much confusion to the game. Now, this is not just a quick solution that can be done by changing the name of something. Legacy mode damage values will need to be buffed to make them competitive. Prayer and potions will need to be looked at to ensure they work for both methods. And of course, the decision of using ability versus non-ability PvP would need to be consulted with the PvP community. Now, if you're a fan of legacy combat, would you be happy if legacy combat was simply an auto attack option previously, kind of like what we had with Momentum now, but with a better interface? I'm not a supporter of legacy combat, so I don't know if this is going to satisfy the demands of what those who want legacy combat require, but if it does, that would be great. And if this sort of thing does not fill the demands of legacy combat, what would? What's missing? Let me know. I want to take part in this discussion. So, I think it's clear that the 2014 combat beta has provided apparent solutions to two of the problems that exist in game, and that's having to push too many buttons to kill anything, and also the desire for the legacy combat system. These solutions are simple and will hopefully generate far less friction than an entirely new legacy combat mode would. And with that being said, I think this is a better way of uniting the community around a problem. Finally, just remember to listen to us when the show is published on Saturday. This week's show is going to be recorded live in RSBandB's Mumble server. Details as to how to join that are also in the description of this video. And we'll talk a bit more about Revolution and Momentum Plus coming to game. That's it for this episode of our RSBandB Update Supplemental. And if you want to chat with me, I'm Shane12088 on RuneScape, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Supplemental.